Welcome back to Marketing Connected. I'm your host, Rizwana Manjur, and you're tuned in to In Conversation, a series where we, as the title suggests, are in conversation with the industry's brilliant minds and experts. Hi, Lex.
Hi.
So in this episode, we've got Lex Bradshaw-Zanger in the studio with us today. So Lex is currently L'Oréal's Chief Marketing and Digital Officer of the SAPMENA region. SAPMENA is South Asia Pacific, Middle East, and North Africa. So he's a very, very busy man. So thank you for your time. This is a role Lex has held for close to 3 years now, I want to say. He's based in Singapore, but in total, Lex has been with L'Oreal for 9.5 years, where he also headed the digital remits for the UK, Ireland, Western Europe, Middle East, and Africa. Prior to that, he's had agency stints at WPP, Leo Burnett. He's worked at Facebook as well and McDonald's. So with that, Lex, thank you so much for joining us.
It's great to be here. You've done a lot of homework on me.
I've done some homework, some LinkedIn stalking, as they put it. Yeah, professional stalking. So it's been about 3 years in Singapore. You've worked in UK, Paris, as I mentioned. Tell us what's it been like for you in Singapore? What makes the market unique? Anything that surprised you?
Wow. Okay, big question. So yes, I've been almost 3 years now in Singapore covering this massive region. We cover 13 time zones, which makes our days very long, and also 40% of the world's population. So it's super, super exciting. I asked for this job. I've worked in the US, I've worked across Europe, across the Middle East and Africa, but Asia I'd only visited enough, and the future was happening here. And so I asked for this role to come to Singapore, and it's been super exciting. I think, Singapore already is this pillar in the middle of Southeast Asia, in the middle of Asia. So great place to cover the region. But Southeast Asia is where the future's happening. In everything we touch, content, media, commerce, influencers. I'm sure we'll talk about live commerce and shopping, all of these things. So super exciting. There's something new to learn every day and something to maybe bring from other experiences, but an exciting place to be and great fun.
So you asked to be moved to Singapore. Did you not have any hesitancies in any fear of transporting yourself to the other side of the world?
Not a moment of it. I've moved around a lot, and I think the first move, the second move, those are difficult. But once you've done a few, you relish the opportunity. There are things that are basic. Finding a house, finding a bank account.
Yeah,
That's simple stuff about getting set up, and then there's all the discovery and the exploration at a personal level, at a professional level. So no fear. I'm definitely a lifelong learner. I like new experiences, and seeing what they bring.
Yeah, and anything that surprised you when you first moved to Singapore? Any market that you like more than others in Southeast Asia?
No, I can't answer that question. I love all the markets equally.
Like making you choose, right?
Between my kids, yes. I love all my kids equally, just not on the same days. No, I think, there are things and you see from the outside, but experiencing them on the inside is very different. And I think the impact that the Chinese ecosystem coming down into Southeast Asia and the Western ecosystem kind of coming together, I think that you don't really feel it, or you don't really understand it until you feel it.
Yeah.
And so everything that's happening in Southeast Asia on content, media, and commerce are a great story from the outside, but probably confusing. And you've really got to get in deep to understand. And so that's a lot of what we're doing, and that's what makes it super exciting.
I love that you said that, because last year we expanded into Australia as a market. Marketing Interactive expanded there, and we're bringing our first conference to Australia. It's called Expand. So one of the things that we wanted to really bring forth to Australian marketers is that you can't just see Southeast Asia or Asia as a whole, right? Every market is so nuanced. Just because, Malaysia and Indonesia has a big Muslim population doesn't make it the same. So was there anything when you first started that really made you think like, oh my gosh, that just blew my mind?
I think every day something blows my mind. No, but I've been lucky. I've definitely been lucky in my career. Worked across the US, across Europe, and now Asia, but also across different categories. I was in the agency world for a while. In the agency world, you bounce between banks and cars and beauty.
Yeah.
And then I was at McDonald's before L'Oréal. I say the ketchup stayed on my lips and became lipstick. But so I think your point about looking at Asia from the outside and saying it's one block, looking at Southeast Asia, saying it's one block, looking at India, this is the problem, or the challenge rather, with marketing at a global level today. How do you find the balance of a global brand, a global vision, a global strategy, and making things locally relevant? I think this is the big challenge, and it's becoming even harder with the explosion of content and platforms. So I think this is the challenge. There's nothing in particular that makes that surprising. It's just how you navigate the ecosystem.
Yeah. you moved from the agency world to the client side, right? And in the agency world, you were exposed to so many different types of clients. But at the client side, you just became like a master of that one brand. How did you keep yourself excited when you didn't have all these different things to hop around and keep your brain tuned into the different ways of working for different brands?
I don't think there is a better role between being on the agency side or being on the client side.
Right.
There is excitement and learning and curiosity in both of them. And I'm never bored. We're not one brand. No? L'Oréal is 37 international brands. So, and even more, if you look at our headquarters in France, we have another big group of brands that are only existing in France and in certain European markets. And then the breadth of what I do. I'm supposed to be a digital and technology expert, as well as somebody who's managing our marketing fundamentals, as well as trying to drive innovation and transformation. So there is never a dull moment. We have 12 subsidiaries across 30 something markets, 40% of the world's population, 37 brands. My to-do list is endless, and there is never a moment of boredom.
Yeah, thank you for fitting us into that to-do list.
That's right.
Before this conversation started, I think one of the questions that I asked you was, is your digital hat bigger or your traditional brand marketing side bigger? What would you say? How do you sort of divide your brain into, handling all of that?
That's a difficult question, because I'm not even sure that those are different things today. I think if you look back at what digital was in the marketing space 5-10 years ago, pre-COVID in particular, there was definitely a thing that people called digital marketing.
Yeah.
I don't think that exists today. I'm almost allergic to digital marketing because there's marketing in a digital world and that's it. And sometimes digital is also a complicated word, because when you say digital, it implies that there's a non-digital as well, which there isn't. I think digital is now an ecosystem, a set of tools, a way of thinking about platforms, a way of thinking about data and technology that empowers marketing. The fundamentals of marketing are still as important as they were probably 50 years ago, before even you or I were in the business. Brands, consumer insights, reach and frequency. These fundamentals are super important in a world that is very digitized.
Yeah. What about when we talk about transformation, right? That's the word that's been thrown around left, right, and center in the last few years. Is there anything about transformation in marketing that you don't buy into?
So I have this sort of, I don't like the word catchphrase, so I'm not going to say that, but I have this saying that I keep trying to use, marketing hasn't changed, but marketers must. And I think there is this piece that people think the fundamentals have gone away. And I don't buy into that. The fundamentals of building brands and the irrational side of people hasn't gone away. Technology's changed a lot, but we haven't really changed biologically. We're still emotional, irrational people. We buy brands, sometimes for reasons that we don't understand and how we're attracted to them. I could tell you a long story about shoes and breaking my ankle if you wanted, and brands there. But so I don't buy into the fact that there is a thing called digital marketing that is different from what, Procter & Gamble was doing 70 years ago, and that all the fundamentals have gone out the window. And I think the challenge is that we probably don't understand fundamentals enough to understand how they're relevant today in the ecosystem.
So how would you say the biggest shift in creativity that has happened because of the mediums coming together, digital being a way of life? And you're doing marketing at scale. You mentioned 37 brands, right? What does that mean for you in terms of how you think about creativity?
Wow. So creativity is a word that can be used in different ways depending on the job you do and the context you're in. If you sit in an advertising agency, creativity is very much about those people in the creative department who have way comfier chairs and colorful walls versus the other guys. But creativity is really about new ways to solve problems using different tools. So I think creativity for us today is saying, okay, what is it that we want to do? What are the tools we've got, the platforms, the channels, the products, and how do you bring all of those things together? And it may not be something new. There's a lot of talk in the moment in the advertising world, marketing world, about consistency. Being consistent, Amazon refreshing ads that they used last year, or Coke going back to something before. That is still being creative. It doesn't mean that you have to create something completely new. So I think it is really about understanding the technology. I remember when I was in the agency world, we used to have these roles, I don't think they exist anymore, called creative technologists. But it was a really cool role. I always wanted to do that. I was always an account person, a suit guy. It was kind of boring. But, creative technologists were cool because they weren't creatives because that was other people. But they weren't like IT guys who were boring. They were the people who said, okay, how do I use new ecosystems, new platforms, new experiences to bring experiences to life for consumers.
That they were the connectors.
They were.
Yeah. So in that way, have you ever thought of, what you believe to be creative, what you believe to be right, but it just doesn't go with the brand? And how do you handle those situations?
Well, I don't think I'm right if it doesn't go with the brand, because I believe that brands are probably the most exciting thing we work with. My first ever job about 177 years ago, I worked for an advertising agency who was selling their brand consultancy as a consulting product for everything that wasn't marketing communications. So we worked for a construction company on their uniforms and how their sites looked. Worked for Home Depot on what the inside of the store looked like and how they trained their staff. And it was all about how do you bring the brand to life, things that are not marketing communications. And so it forced, first of all, every part of the organization to really understand what the brand was about. And then you say, okay, what is the brand about? What's its tone of voice? How does it exist? Then what are the codes? The right color, not just the logo. And then how do you bring them to life on those platforms? And so I think if something is not a fit for the brand, then it's not right. I believe that our job, and we've maybe moved more to the rational side of things, is to build this irrational piece about why people connect with brands.
But is there ever an incident where you were strongly against the idea, but your teams were very much for it, and you just had to be like, okay, I'm gonna go with your gut, not mine. How did that pan out?
I don't think I can answer this question. I'm sure there are moments. I am not the library of right, of good ideas, of the right answers. There are moments when you need to test things, when you need to do different things, when you need to, be more price driven versus storytelling driven. But everything is balanced.
Yeah.
It's a bit Oscar Wilde. Everything in moderation, including moderation. That's what we need to do in marketing. We need to be everywhere and do all the right things at the right level.
Yeah, okay, fair enough. I guess I asked that question because so many global brands are trying to localize but still retain who they are as brands, right? Where is that line between localization and staying true to your brand? How do you approach this in L'Oréal? Because you are in every market and every market has its own story to tell.
But I think that is exactly the skill that anything but probably local marketers need to manage these days. We're in a world that is much, much more globalized than ever before. We talk a lot about capitalism and globalization from a commerce point of view, but I think we don't talk enough about globalization from a consumer point of view. On TikTok, on Instagram, you can be watching reels and trends on the other side of the world in real time. And so consumers are as globalized as companies, even if that's sort of shifting a little bit with geopolitics these days. So the real core for a marketer is saying, okay, I need to understand what is fixed. What is my brand about that is not movable, whether I'm in India or Germany or Venezuela. There are things about brands that have to be fixed. And then there are elements that make them locally relevant. And that's really the trick. I think a lot of marketers probably see constraints around those things versus they need to see it as an opportunity. This is the playing field. This is the guideline on which I can do anything I want, as long as I'm still on brand.
Yeah. How did you get local market buy-in? Because one of the things that we spoke about with the CMO of Chaji, who used to be the marketing director regionally for McDonald's International, is that because he came from the market first and then got elevated to this role, got some really good recognition while he was in market, those roles, people were like, okay, he knows his stuff. He's been in that role. But sometimes when you're a regional, sort of holding a regional sort of remit, people are like, this guy doesn't understand.
That's true.
So how do you get that buy-in?
No, but you have to, you're right. You need credibility at different levels. And credibility and experience at a regional or a global level comes from having done different things.
Yeah.
I've definitely been lucky to have done different places around the world, different categories, different types of consumers, to learn something from each one and piece them together. I don't think it would be easy to be a global brand guardian and not ever have understood what it means to bring it to life. But also, I think it also goes both ways. It's about being super, super clear and everybody understanding what brands mean and what they stand for.
Yeah.
And that even more in the world today, between AI and LLMs and so much kind of happening on the screen between a chat and something you don't control. And that's a challenge, because how do you really understand a brand? Like it's somewhat instinctive. It's what it looks like. It's about experience. And maybe if you've only experienced one market, then your view of that is slightly warped. So the idea of seeing and experiencing a brand in different places around the world can also add to it.
Yeah. Fantastic. Now, I know when I first spoke to you, we were at the L'Oreal Big Bang Beauty Tech, and you were very busy, but I, bugged you nonetheless. And I want to talk about that a little bit because it's
Sure.
made quite a name for itself. So, can you tell us a little bit about how Big Bang Beauty Tech actually came around? What were the problems that you were originally trying to solve for, and how would you say it has grown or addressed some of these problems?
So first of all, I think two kind of fundamental pillars. One, we know that innovation doesn't just come from inside the organization. We may be the largest in beauty, we may have labs and
Yeah.
scientists everywhere, but innovation comes from everywhere. I think that's the first piece. And the second piece is everywhere around the world, we have different ways of engaging with startups and engaging with the startup community. So when you bring those two together, that's the core piece. How do we identify organizations, ideas, entrepreneurs that want to do something with our brand, and how do we find a win-win? It's really about a win-win. So that's the way it started. In the UK, we used to have an investment type approach where we would bring portfolio companies in. In North Asia, we do something similar to the Big Bang, where it's really a pitching competition. It means that you can go really broad and you can bring something exciting. You can really bring people's ideas together.
I really loved it. I enjoyed myself, especially the guy with the plastic. I can't remember, but his
The
solution.
recycling.
Yes.
So without in India, they're recycling the unrecyclable. It's great.
And also the impact on the community
Yeah.
because of the people that he's getting on board.
Yes, they're taking waste pickers and
Yeah.
upgrading their career potential. So super
Amazing.
exciting.
It was so inspiring. I felt goosebumps when I was listening to you. So I guess my question is, how do you know whether an idea is worth scaling? Because something like that sounds great when it's being presented, right? But operationally, logistically, it's hard to get on the ground. So how do you know when it's worth investing or killing?
So I think there is So I think there's a broader question, which is when do you take a startup and when do you scale it, and
Yeah.
then there's what's right for us.
Yeah.
We do this ourselves because we want to find things that are right for us, for our brands, for our category, and for our organization. So it's not always the best idea if they don't have the scalability, the teams, the ability to work with large corporates. Bridging a startup and a corporate is a project in and of itself. How do you find the right way to find a proof of concept to build it? So we look for good ideas, we look for strong teams, we look for willingness to work with our brands and in our category, and then we look for the ability to go through something in the medium term. Because we've got to go through a scoping phase, we've got to understand IT implications,
Yeah.
legal, all of these different pieces, and then we've got to do something that's exciting.
Yeah.
That's also why part of the program is not just a proof of concept with the brands, but it's how we work. So we give the startups access to our partners. We have a lot of our leaders who mentor the startups and engage with them.
Yeah.
And we try and create content as well and talk about them. So it's not just all focused in on, can I get, La Roche-Posay to work with this content developer in this market?
Yeah. How do you approach beauty tech? And how's that sort of disrupted? I know this word it gets used a lot, but disrupted your thinking as a marketer.
So beauty tech for us it's a lot of different things. It's how data, technology, digital, AI impact the work we do,
Yeah.
both inside and outside the organization. So in the experiences for our consumers, but also in the experiences for our employees. If I think about our employees, we have a bunch of internal tools that are beauty tech as well. We have our own L'Oréal GPT that's 2 years old now. We have a bunch of different tools. We have a partnership with IBM for AI in our labs. But then it's also all the solutions we bring to consumers. So in 2018, we acquired a Canadian company called Modiface.
Okay.
And they were one of the leaders in virtual reality
yeah.
at the time.
Yeah.
Now they power all of our services, whether it's virtual try-on for makeup, whether
Yeah.
it's skin analysis for skincare, all of these different pieces that they power it. So beauty tech is just how do you bring technology to build better experiences for consumers and that build the brand as well.
Yeah. How do you, is it really on the thread of disruption, is it really possible for large companies to really disrupt because you've got so many things in place and structures, and disruption requires collaboration at scale almost, right? So is it really possible, or are we just sort of just masking it as like, oh, this is disruption, but actually only one team is working on it?
I think a lot of that question depends on what you mean by disruption. It can be, so what's that book, The Innovator's Dilemma? How do you move from an existing business to a new business, and when do you decide to drop? But I don't think that's maybe the model for large organizations. Large organizations are, at what pace can you evolve and at what pace can you innovate? And I think that's where L'Oréal has its strength, is very innovation centric, very innovation driven. So we're always reinventing at the front edge. So is that disruption or not? I think it's disruptive. because we'll come out with new products, new solutions, new molecules.
Yeah.
But some of those take very long amount of time, some of them take very short amount of time,
Yeah.
but they are definitely disrupting and changing the environment.
Yeah. So 9 years with L'Oreal, across so many countries. What about L'Oreal really feels like you?
I think, if you talk to anybody from the group, the first thing people will talk about is the people. And I think what I find interesting in the role I have is I'm the bridge or the glue or the translation. The magic happens between functions, between skills. And with my job that touches a lot of different things across all of our brands and countries, what I can do is bring people, functions, capabilities together. We talked about creativity to create something new and exciting for our consumers and for the brands.
Yeah, and that feels very Lex.
I hope so.
So my final question, which is also a personal question, your skin is amazing. It's so dewy. What is your skincare
It's the heat
routine?
in the studio, the pressure of your question. So
Tell us what's your secret
my skin area.
looking youthful forever.
So my favorite brand in the group, in the portfolio, is La Roche-Posay.
Okay.
For two or three reasons. One, the products are very, very good. I think you have to start with product quality.
Okay.
So that's maybe what's on my skin. But it's also a brand that has strong brand codes and brand assets, and it has a purpose and a history. La Roche-Posay is a place. It's a thermal spa in the Alps. It's also a place where there has been a place where people would go to touch the waters. Historically, burn victims would go there because the water has real healing powers.
Wow.
And over time, cancer victims and cancer treatment have very similar symptoms to burn victims.
Wow.
And so this is why La Roche-Posay has a big presence in cancer support and in charities that operate in that
Amazing.
space. So a beautiful brand,
Yeah.
comes to life in the right way, real purpose and great product. So I think I've got some La Roche-Posay serum on today. So hopefully keeping me young and making me look good for you.
Absolutely. Now we're going to wrap up the podcast, but before we let you go, anything that you want to leave our listeners and viewers with?
There's this book I love called Range, which talks about Tiger Woods and Roger Federer. Have you read this book?
No, I haven't.
So I think the book is, Tiger Woods played golf forever from when he could walk.
Okay.
And Federer, his parents made him play lots of different sports until he was 16 before he became this amazing tennis player. I love that book because I think it explains my career. I've done different countries, different categories, different types of jobs, but it's having that range of experiences that enables me to look at different problems in different ways and hopefully succeed a little bit in building our brands in the region here.
Well, we're rooting for your success for sure. And on that note, thank you so much for being part of this conversation. To our listeners out there, don't worry, even though this interview with Lex Bradshaw-Zanger of L'Oreal is over, you can check out more In Conversation episodes and other marketing connected interviews on your favorite podcast platforms. Be sure to follow us on Marketing Interactive's social media pages, LinkedIn, Telegram, Facebook, Instagram. And once again, thank you for tuning in to Marketing Connected, brought to you by Marketing Interactive. Bye.